Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Welcome everybody to another live on Facebook Encounters with Adam. As I said right from the start, the reason why I'm doing these is because I travel up and down the country, sometimes to different countries, and I meet the most amazing, the most interesting people. Sometimes they're scholars, sometimes they're athletes, sometimes they're artists. And what I want to do is take the experience and take the beneficial knowledge or insights what they give and share them with everybody on my Facebook friends list. So today I'm here, as you can see in the title, with the Mufti, with the Tufti. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Sheikh Adam. But why is it that you said sometimes I meet athletes and sometimes, why was that necessary? Was that to rule out me being a scholar?
No, it was to I meet some interesting people, and lots of the athletes are very, very flexible. Are you the same?
I can't really say. I can't possibly comment on things like that.
No. So basically, just to introduce yourself to everybody who's watching. Who are you and where are you from?
Right. From Brum, from Birmingham, people. This is it. I'm a humble, your brother, akhukum, the humble, the Muslim, the mu'min.
Right, so
I'm on Facebook anyway. You can check me out, Mufti Abu Layth, and inshallah you can send me a friend request. Although I'm maxed out.
So already
send
people will be watching this and thinking, "Whoa, this guy's a bit of a character. Who is he?" So Mufti. But Mufti, your name Mufti.
As long as it's not the authorities asking, but yeah.
Can you explain to people who might not know what a Mufti is? That's your title, isn't it, Mufti?
You never told me I'll have to explain things.
Okay.
I would have revised.
No, this is the point. So, because you're not an athlete, are you? I could have been asking you about sport.
That's true. Then I would have been really stuck. But a Mufti is I suppose it's a functional title within Islam. So it's not, although it can be treated as an honorific, but it's not necessarily just about it's more about a functional role that may be carried out by, so like doctor. Or traditionally you had Qadi, which was a judge, or you had Mufti, who is somebody that is qualified to issue edicts or fatwas, which are Islamic rulings. So to deal with the problems and issue actual rulings which then become part of Islamic law.
Okay, so you're telling me and everybody else now that you're qualified in issuing rulings based on Islamic law.
Well, that's what the certificate that I bought from eBay said.
no, but on a serious note, many people are going to see you.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, this is my first impression.
Okay.
I see you coming out with the muscles and the silver bracelets and chains and
silver all the way.
What do you say to people when they say to you, "You don't look like a Mufti"?
You see, I think there are it's true that we have naturally stereotypes of perception. So when we say Mufti, or people who do know what a Mufti is, or even if they don't know what a Mufti is, but they're thinking, okay, an Islamic scholar, a scholar within Islam, there will be a perception that they have, that this person should or ought to have a certain attire, so dressed maybe a bit more like yourself, Sheikh, have preferably a long beard, or at least a more, I don't know, like culturally acceptable religious kind of beard. So I suppose this is still a beard, but people will not associate it necessarily with religion.
Yeah.
Like it could just be cultural, it could just be out of fashion, it could be, I suppose you could say religion, but it's not clear. Whereas if you see a clear beard, it gives that understanding. So they're having these perceptions already. So now they're going to see me. Also, somebody who's not, who's.
We're back. We're back.
Okay, we're back.
So we just lost a bit of signal there.
Right, okay.
The question was, you were just explaining, when people come to you and say, "Huh,
Yeah.
Mufti, you don't look like a Mufti."
I'll be like, tell me about it. No, but I think it's the perception that thinking we know what a Mufti looks like. So it's the same kind of thing, you see, that people have an assumption of an ascetic look, or somebody that isn't, like I said, long beard, wearing Eastern kind of clothes. That's the perception people will have. So, Allahu Akbar. So I must be a mufti if I'm having tea handed to me. That qualifies it.
But in terms of Islamic rules, which
Yeah.
you're well versed in and qualified to even offer issue rulings, then there are no issues with the way you dress.
I mean, from an Islamic perspective, there is no such thing as a uniform within Islam. There is no such thing as an attire that a mufti ought to wear, or even a Muslim, or has to, or should, or is more suitable, or even for Muslims in general. This is, see, there's a distinction between what, if we are to use the term like, if we can use the term Islamic culture, I don't think we necessarily can, but Muslim culture has many things. So Muslim culture has certain type of clothing, certain type of food, certain type of whatever. But that's not necessarily Islamic. So there's a distinction.
Yeah.
So from an Islamic perspective, there's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah.
People who believe, I'll tell you, those who may object to what I'm saying, from a technical perspective, will be an extreme minority. Many of them that are objecting are actually objecting from a cultural perspective. That just because culturally they've not been exposed to that. The weak argument that an extreme minority may have is those who will really just stretch, I would actually believe exploit a hadith that has nothing to do with it, which would say, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." Whosoever resembles a people is from amongst them.
And they'll probably
And they will say that fits.
Typing on a Chinese or Japanese keyboard and drinking
of course,
American branded food. Yeah.
Exactly. So, what does resemblance mean? Yeah. But they will use that to say, in clothing, which is nonsense. The majority of Muslims will never accept that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you mentioned before that being a mufti has an element of qualification.
It does.
Can you share with us what kind of what's involved in that process and that journey?
That's a
for
good
yourself,
question,
what have you had to go through until you were qualified, besides buying the fake certificate on eBay?
All right, besides my certificate, which is guaranteed by PayPal. So the thing is, I think also tea when it's cold just doesn't serve a function, does it? But no, I'm only joking. I'm grateful.
So that was a fatwa. That was a fatwa.
That was a fatwa. I can't retract it now. So the thing is,
so basically, for those who don't know as well, maybe lots of non-Muslims are watching this.
Sure.
When we're talking about fatwa, we're talking about Islamic law.
We're talking about Islamic rulings.
And so this trendy, groovy guy with spiky hair and a chain on, he's actually trained and fully qualified in Islamic law.
Should I take that out, which has been objected to? I actually think that's very cool, actually. I don't know why some people object to it. I think they only object to it from bad taste.
Okay.
So I'll excuse them.
So back to the qualification, because as
I
you
want
said,
this to also be...
it's not about the clothes. It's not about the clothes. It's about the qualification. Many people have the clothes and will try to present themselves as qualified to give rulings when they're not.
True.
And that's dangerous. You're the opposite of that. You're somebody who wears, smart clothes. I'll choose my words
regular
carefully.
clothes.
Regular clothes. No, smart clothes.
Okay, shukran.
Your tufti beard.
There you go.
And
I have to maintain.
But as whatever anybody wants to say, you're qualified. So tell us a bit about that qualification
and I hope this. I'll tell you a bit about what's involved, and I hope this can also serve maybe as an inspiration for some people who are interested in studying or taking such a path. You see, the route or the path to becoming an Islamic scholar, what it will involve is basically covering the Islamic sciences. So I'll just touch up on what they are and the different levels that you have to cover them at. So the Islamic sciences, if we're to very kind of like briefly summarize them, they will be to do with the Quran. That is a block in itself, which divides into one actually being able to read the Quran, the recitation, the understanding of the Quran, the tafsir, and the principles behind how to do tafsir, meaning commentary, the principles behind how to do commentary upon the Quran. That's one section, if you like, tafsir. You have hadith, which is a collection of the sayings or the actions or the rulings from the Prophet ﷺ that have been catalogued. You will, studying that in itself, studying the principles behind how to grade these, which is called Usul al-Hadith or Mustalah al-Hadith. Studying, there's a branch of that itself, a branch in the actual inheritance transactions will be covered law. Now, that is called fiqh, and at times sharia.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum people, this is a continuation from the episode which we started, Encounters with Adam, hashtag Encounters with Adam. If you benefit from these, share them now and let as many people benefit as possible. So continuing on from what we were saying, we just had a few technical issues, the internet went down, something. This is one of the dangers of not having a multi-million pound production studio. It's just on my mobile phone, on Facebook Live, keeping things simple, keeping things real. And today we're with Mufti Abu Layth, who was just explaining to us the process of Islamic studies. And I think the bit which you cut out on, you were talking about fiqh and the different types of fiqh. So first we started talking about, was it your tufty beard and your cool dress sense,
and
how you are kind of breaking stereotypes which people have of muftis and religious people and scholars in general. And then we went on to talking about your qualification and the things which a person has to follow in the process of becoming a mufti.
So we were just talking about the level of studies involved in becoming an Islamic scholar, and I've spoken about the aspect of the Quran studies. There was the Hadith studies and all its branches. There was fiqh. I've mentioned how it branches off into the actual fiqh, usul al-fiqh, the legal theory, maqasid, the objectives behind fiqh, its constitution, stuff like that. I've mentioned about lugha, language. Language is also one of the sciences. It kind of branches off into several things. You'll have grammar, morphology, things like rhetoric, which is called balagha. You'll have poetry, actual adab, which is literary works.
Speaking of adab, forgive me for having that adab, but to summarise that for the general person, you've got to study, and you've got to study hard if you want to become a qualified scholar.
It's not. You see, these were aspects that I was just trying to put out there for maybe people who are interested. That you have that's language is a science. You will have creed. I mentioned belief. The theology involved, the actual core belief in itself, philosophy of religion will be involved.
You see, I'm interested in the people who aren't interested.
Who aren't
interested, because I want
them to understand.
I want to raise awareness of the process.
What's important to know is that these sciences, they have layers to them. So you will have a foundational layer, which just covers them, basically gives you an understanding of all of them. So you know them, you can reiterate them. That's what the foundational. Then you have an intermediate level of them where you will study them, you can explain them, you ought to be able to analyze them, and you will study dissents, differences of opinion within all of these branches and sciences. You will understand the reasoning behind that. And then there's an advanced layer where you will not go into much more intricate detail on the dissents, but also hopefully be synthesizing and evaluating your own understanding. Now, to be a scholar, you would have to have done the foundational level in all of these sciences. You would have had to have completed the intermediate layer within all these sciences, and an advanced layer in some of these. So you may not be advanced in every, so it doesn't mean you had to have been as advanced in poetry with that much detail, but maybe in Islamic law or Quran. So you've studied foundational and intermediate and an advanced in some at least, but the intermediate in all. Now this level of study would on average take anything like maybe ranging from 6 years to 8 years.
Okay.
That's, I mean, on variation, some institutes may have it within a 6 year.
And somebody like yourself who's been through this process, you didn't get to 8 years and think, oh, that's it, now I'm done. It's still an ongoing process.
It is an ongoing,
lifelong
process.
So what is your message then?
My message
to a teenage brother who's overzealous, he's got loads of energy, he's read a few lines in a book here or there, and he thinks he can bring arguments to refute the scholars?
See, the thing is, that's a good question, because you see, what you're trying, in essence, what's being said is, how do you explain to somebody who can't understand what you want to explain to him?
Yeah. So how do you do that?
And that's a very, it's like saying, well, I can see I can see a perspective which you can't see because of where you are. So I'm trying to explain that there are layers to what this understanding.
Yep.
You're looking at this in very black and white. And I know for some people it's, I don't know, maybe you see people in general struggle with ambiguity. Right? People don't like ambiguity.
They feel threatened by something being different.
They feel threatened. They feel kind of like, because people find comfort in absolutes. That they just want an absolute, like just tell me that it's just a yes, it's a no, or this is now simple. Like they want things to be, which is weird, but this is how people.
Yeah.
And when you tell them, well, actually, there's multiple understandings here, there's multiple opinions.
Yeah. But back to that complex.
Yeah.
Why do you think people are like that? Why do they love absolutes and feel threatened by plurality?
I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think it's actually lower level thinking.
Okay.
Sorry, have I just become an elitist?
No. I think from one perspective, would it be fair?
Would I be a ruler according to Plato? No, my point is that it's an unexamined analysis of religion. So it's an unlearned view. So it's like somebody. You see, people don't think the same of other sciences.
Yeah.
So if you said most people, I've put myself in that as well, wouldn't understand what quantum physics is all about. Yet they would recognize it has complexity to it.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have the audacity to kind of, let me just Google what quantum physics is all about and have an opinion. And let me reach out to a professor and start saying, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, medicine the same. People would recognize. Like if you think about it, look, a doctor's training, the actual degree in itself, whether it's going to be 3 years followed by 2 years of practice, whatever it is, okay, that's 5 years of learning, or even if it's 6. That in essence is the same kind of learning to become a scholar within Islam. 6 years of training. At least, the Mufti course would be on top of that.
Yeah.
Another 1 or 2 years as it was in my case. But the point is, now people, they recognize sophistication in other areas, but for some reason, they think, oh yeah, but I've been a Muslim all my life, so I should have some level of say on Islam. But that's like saying you've had an anatomy all your life. So you should have some say on anatomy.
Yeah.
So you should be able to say, well, I've had a liver all my life. So, I should have a say on what a liver does. But it doesn't work like that, does it? But they would recognize the absurdity of that, but they wouldn't recognize the absurdity of the first statement. Hopefully, this isn't everybody, and it isn't everybody. And so, but those few people that do see the world very black and white, I'd like to tell them it is actually very colourful. It's 4K colourful now, super ultra HD. But it's just, we've got to kind of upgrade our understandings.
Speaking of upgrading understandings and colourful images.
Samsung, I'm still on the... yeah.
We were talking before about your appearance, your goatee beard.
What I've actually learnt is called a tufti. I did not actually know that. And that was by courtesy of Sheikh Adam.
Just to let you guys know as well, we're going to be inviting questions, if anybody has any questions, to be answered by Mufti Abu Layth. We were talking before about your appearance and how it's kind of, swimming against the tide in terms of the accepted norms, as you talked about them before. How important is that for you, and what gates and what doors does that open for you? Because personally, I see many of the people who keep your company, who study with you, who take benefit from you, many of them, if it wasn't for your approach, they wouldn't be sitting with with all due respect, the traditional Maulanas.
True. I mean, although I don't think that's a nice way to speak about Asim, but no, but I mean, the thing is that
See you in court, Asim.
right. The thing is, you see, what's interesting is you asked how many doors has that opened for you.
Yeah.
I want to say that it also closes
Okay.
a lot of doors.
Okay. What doors? Does it
So,
close?
like, a lot of people will, like, there will be a struggle naturally in people trying to control you, or you. They don't want you present in certain things because they don't want you influencing other people.
Okay.
So they will. So, for example,
So they feel uncomfortable with the image,
they feel
and
uncomfortable.
they'll keep you
with
at a
me.
distance.
Yeah. So people will say things
But
like,
the thing is that you know that.
"Yeah, I know that."
Do they know that you know that?
That's a good question. I don't know whether they know.
Well, they do now.
Right, hashtag hate is gonna hate. The thing is that so people will say, so as an example, let's say forums like whether it's going to be universities, colleges, or things like this, people who have any sense of control will think, oh, I don't want this guy coming here, let's close the door for him, because
Okay.
he's not conventional enough for us,
Okay.
and we don't want him influencing people.
Okay.
But at the same time, and you know, Allah works in mysterious ways, and the thing is that this, although it may close many doors like that,
Yeah.
but it opens, and the question, going to the question, it opens the doors to your regular, you're kind of confused, I suppose, Muslim who, and I don't mean confused in a, they have to be confused, but people who are struggling with religion as it's being portrayed.
Yeah.
As it's being delivered to them, and they're unsettled with the notion of religion that they're finding, but they want to be true to religion. They want to be true.
So would it be safe to say the expected image, which we were talking about before,
Yeah,
they don't feel comfortable with the expected image,
I find a lot of people struggle with that image.
and when they find somebody like you,
Yeah,
they feel they can approach you, they feel comfortable. I mean, it's obvious for everybody to see you've got quite a sense of humour as well.
okay.
I mean, we've been
Yeah,
laughing.
well, it's got me in a bit of trouble. Well, I can't discuss that.
No. So we've been discussing. We've been laughing from the beginning of this.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in terms of approachability. I think maybe, just maybe, you're filling a niche which is on the increase. The niche is growing bigger.
I mean, I would love for more and more du'at, imams, people involved with Islam at a leadership level, scholars, I would love for them to embrace this kind of outlook on life, this approach on life, where they can be comfortably part of the environment, that they can present Islam in a very, I'm not saying they don't present Islam, they do, but they present it within a very culturally defined kind of, what I think is a niche, but presented on such a large scale.
I see.
Right now,
So what you're saying is that you're not actually covering the niche. You're covering what should be the default.
I feel this
However-
should be how Islam is.
However, what should be the niche is being presented to the
As
masses.
the whole. And people don't know any different. And then there's naturally the question of numbers. That people feel, well, you know what, how could all these people be wrong? Sorry about that. Okay, evacuate. Right, so the thing is now...
So sorry, you use a mobile phone as well?
Allahu Akbar.
You really are, Majan, aren't you?
I am indeed. So, and I'm on Snapchat. So the thing is, now people, they would feel that, how can this person be right? If he is right, how can it be these thousands of people are wrong?
Okay.
You see, now that is the kind of, that is the enigma that kind of really gets people.
Can I ask you a question?
Go on then. I don't think you were going to ask. I have to say the feeling is mutual.
Do you ever think that?
What are we talking about?
If all these thousands of
Because
people,
I got distracted for a moment.
if all these thousands of people are right, then why am I not with them?
Why am I?
No,
Why am I like this? No, it's a good question.
You see, do you ever think? I want to get inside.
I think
inside
I
your mind now.
definitely did think that at some point.
Yeah.
That I thought, well, how can it be? that all
Just
these
to ask,
people-
on your whole journey and your studies and everything, have you always
Been
been
thinking
the
like
person
this?
who you are?
No,
Or
I think that there was a
have there
lot
been
of
times
change.
when you've been much more conservative?
Like I was
much more
very. I mean, personally, I don't like this term, although I do use it just as everybody does, but I don't like this term conservative and liberal and stuff like that, because I feel this was in essence a Western political rrhetoric that didn't apply to the Muslim world from an Islamic perspective, and has been superimposed in recent times, because it was all about rebelling to authority. Now, Muslims traditionally, the scholars didn't have authority to rebel against, and they were usually the ones that were rebelling anyway. So it was a bit, the whole frame was different framework. But anyway, I was nothing like this when I began my studies. I was very different. This is why, in many ways, I can relate to.
We'll post a picture in the comment section.
And that picture is actually whilst evolution was taking place. That wasn't an earlier version of me. So I've been through many of those phases. What people go through, so I can relate to what they're going through. Unlike maybe them being unable to relate to me. You see, there was a time when I felt Islam was very ascetic. That Islam was about asceticism. That it was about, like, when we would study, we would do things like, we believed it was religious to do things like denounce certain comforts. Like, and I mean at a very basic level even. So certain type of, let's say, certain type of clothing, expensive clothes, or even stylish clothing, being stylish, let's say, having hairstyle, doing, even at a very fundamental level of things like using a bed to sleep.
Wow.
Like, people would think you should sleep on the ground.
What, you sleep on a bed?
Now I sleep on a bed.
Did you call yourself a Mufti?
Yeah. Yeah, salam. But the thing is, it's memory foam. So the point is that, but there was a point where we went through that phase. So it's not that where I thought wearing, for example, trousers, jeans.
Would you not say for some people there may be benefit in this approach as well? Or?
No, my point isn't about. You see, I think
one being right and the other being
my
wrong.
point is, if somebody said to me, "Look, I want to wear a thobe," I have no problem with that. You can wear whatever you want, or the absence thereof. Like, it doesn't really bother me. It could bother me, borderline. Depends, really. I mean, if you walk into the steam room and it's only you and me, and I guess it could bother me. But the thing is, now, my point is that where you stamp that as religion and stamp out other views as irreligious, that bothers me. Because that is not real. You see, there is no uniform in Islam. Now, when you start to say, yeah, but my clothes are of piety, yours are of the kuffar. Like, that stuff is a wrong, false notion. It must be eradicated. Because it will lead to greater problems. We have to stop this thought. We seriously, generally have to stop this thought of us first then. And there are times...
Are you talking about within Islam or without? Or both?
Both. Yeah. I think, especially without as well.
So what are the dangers of us versus them then?
Because this kind of thing, it further breeds a lot of resentment, unnecessary resentment. It breeds confusion. People feel that they're duty bound to hate people. Religion should never teach you hate. If you think... if you've found God, and now by finding God you've learned to become a hateful person, then you haven't found God. It's as simple as that. Right? So the thing is that if you've become somebody that, or if this us versus them, it leads to stuff like, well, okay, we have to be distinct in everything. Kuffar are all about this, that we are like this, they are like this. But when we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like they were. Yes, they had deen. The Prophet ﷺ, when in fact the first mithaq, the first kind of people have translated it as the constitution of Medina, where the Prophet said that us and the Yahud and the Jewish community of such and such, that we nahnu ummatun wahida, we are one ummah.
We are one people.
That we are one people. That we will bear the damage, like meaning if they got into trouble and compensation had to be paid, we would out of our own wealth cover their losses. like to that. I mean, you got to remember as well that look, at a time when wealth and I suppose it still is today, but especially more so then, it was everything for survival. Like having resources, having things. It was integral that we will actually give that away for a people who today people think we're meant to hate. You know, oh, we ought to hate this community. We ought to hate that community. Islam hasn't taught us that. So I think this kind of and part of this comes down to things like clothing. Oh, but that's the clothing of the kuffar. What on earth does that even mean, the clothing of the kuffar? Like how was the Prophet ﷺ's clothing any different from the regular non-Muslim Arabs of his time? It wasn't. He was just wearing the same clothes. In fact, in the hadith in Tirmidhi, when the Prophet went to Tabuk, which was within the region of Rome, it mentions labisa jubbatan shamiyah. He wore a Roman, because Sham at that time was understood as Roman. He wore a Roman thobe, and it's the one in the hadith, and it was different, and it was Islam challenging, if you like, because it would have such tight kind of like cuffs that you couldn't do wudu with it, because the hadith mentions to do wudu, the Prophet had to take his hand out from underneath and wash it and then put it back on. It was that tight. You couldn't actually pull it up. So it was, it's problematic to, let's say, wudu and worship, and the Prophet ﷺ wore it. And the legend, Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi, the legend of Muslim Spain, he writes in his commentary, Ibn Arabi says that this is a dalil that when you go to a certain land, you embrace the clothing of that land. There's no harm in this. And in fact, you get mentioning Ibn Arabi, it's interesting how you see these people were very confidently Muslim. Dons, scholars, legends of Islam, Hafidh of Hadith, have written commentaries on the Quran, have written things like, expansive commentaries on Hadith, on Tirmidhi. In fact, one of the only. But what I was going to say is an interesting point is how they viewed Islam. So that's an example, but you take a look at, now there's a hadith which he covers in Tirmidhi, which is Baytun la tamra fihi jia'un ahlu, that any household which has no dates in it, its people are hungry, might as well be hungry. That this is how and him commenting on this says, oh, by the way, for us in Al-Andalus in Spain, this would be, for us this statement will read as Baytun la, he says la tina fihi, that has no figs in it. Its household will be empty. Not dates for us, it's figs for us. Because that is the staple kind of part of the staple diet of the people of Al-Andalus. So my point being that him seeing this as natural, like, oh yeah, of course the hadith, yeah, but that was talking about the Arabs eating dates. We in Spain don't eat dates, we eat figs. So naturally Islam would say this about
the equivalent
exactly.
Dates back then are figs today. And so what you're saying is the equivalent
is like protein shake.
Is the shirt? No, the shirt what you're wearing.
Yeah, I mean,
you've got to open the buttons for wudu.
Right, exactly. I mean, the thing is, if you're going to walk around, there's no harm in. Look, if somebody wants to wear a thobe, you can wear a thobe. But the point is, it's not seen as indigenous to these lands. It's seen as foreign. Like, okay, it's seen as you're dressing like a foreigner. That's to the non-Muslim eye, it's seen as like, okay, this guy's just dressing as a foreigner.
Or clergy.
Or as clergy, yeah. Fair enough. I mean, it as, the man of the cloth, so to speak. But
back to Qadi Abu Bakr.
Allahu Akbar.
He was
one of my favourites.
Same here. He was a scholar.
He was an amazing scholar. Yeah.
And he was a Western scholar as well.
Yes,
he operated in.
He lived and born and raised.
He was a Maliki, and as I understand, you're also a Maliki.
I am a Maliki.
Maliki fiqh.
I do teach Maliki.
Here's a question I've always wondered about: is Maliki fiqh, by virtue of it being developed in a geographically closer country to us, more relevant to us here and the different challenges, the different...
It may come across naturally with some bias, because people will say, well, I am Maliki, but I do actually
trained
believe...
in the Hanafi madhab as well?
I am trained. I'm trained in more than the Maliki school, in the Maliki, the Hanafi school. But the point is that I do believe that the Maliki fiqh is more conducive to... It's more kind of... I feel it's much more appropriate for the Western climate. Just
Well, that's not to say nobody else can have
no,
any
it
other
doesn't.
madhab
No,
within-
it does not mean. I have no issue.
I'm just coming back to these people
but
who we
I-
were
but
talking
I
about
think-
before.
Yeah,
They might feel threatened by
this
hearing
is
that.
in no way to, to. Yes, a person can change their school of law without any, from an Islamic perspective, without any problem. And technically, you don't even need to really be following a school of law, except it would make it difficult for you to learn Islam systematically if you didn't do so. But I do feel that certain outlooks, like the Maliki, which is known as the school of Medina, that outlook does suit the Western climate for certain inherent reasons that it has. Its outlook on, its attitude towards maslahah, towards welfare, its emphasis on culture. It's these kind of things make it, in my understanding, very not only compatible but ideal.
Yeah.
Not to disregard other schools of law.
How does the geographical element come in? Because this is just
You
one
see,
thing I've thought. I've thought
Yeah.
because we're geographically closer to North Africa
we are.
than any other
Like so, the
quote-unquote
closest,
Muslim
so the
land, I
closest
think it's just
Muslim country
natural.
to us, which shares the same timeline
Yeah.
as us, GMT, is Morocco, which is Maliki.
And not just that, because of its geographic proximity,
Yeah,
we get cheap flights there as well.
we do.
And so more and more Muslims, have you noticed over the years,
seem
are
to be
starting
going
to travel over.
towards Morocco, yeah. And I think that is definitely a reason, but also the fact that for almost 700 years, somebody could argue, for almost 700 years, this particular fiqh kind of thrived within Muslim Spain. And it saw, during a time, obviously it was like a roller coaster ride, if you like, but but there were times of extreme kind of like heights for Muslims as a global civilization during that time, when they were, leading in science, leading in whether it's going to be mathematics, leading in other things, almost at the height of civilization, and that was within Muslim Spain. Muslims at that time, who happened to be Maliki, used this fiqh and developed it to coexist. Overall, yes, like any part of the world and any part of history, there will always be some turbulence somewhere, there will be some unrest. But generally speaking, with a great amount of peaceful, warm and positive coexistence between Muslims and non-Muslims, where they did things like attended each other's funerals, attended each other's weddings, they had non-Muslim neighbors, there was this kind of coexistence, which, although the society was different to us, being from a medieval period, but we can use that as a stepping stone, as milestones, or as a model
For the context.
that we're in, exactly.
So that brings me to the conclusion.
Alright, become Maliki. No.
No comment. So, mashallah. Malik, mashallah. So that brings me to the conclusion. How do you summarize the need what we have to translate what we're talking about, the whole body of Islam as inheritance from the Prophet ﷺ in the form of knowledge to the times what we're in today? Try and summarize what is needed to be able to successfully translate Islam to something which is approachable, something which is relevant, and something which is also true to the tradition.
You see, what I would say is that we have to, I feel, along the way somewhere, I don't know why, I mean there may be multiple reasons, but for some reason a culture developed that started to dislike reason, and it started to have a kind of cast a negative light on reason and independent thought and thinking, being kind of like a thinking people. Although ironically, when you look at the message of the Quran, it was all about, do you not reason? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ. Do they not reflect? Do they not reason? If you look at the key prophets and messengers that were sent, Ibrahim alayhi salam, you can look at Musa alayhi salam, Moses, Jesus, all of them, a lot of their message was all about reasoning. Jesus saying things like, or challenging some norms, but encouraging people to think.
Yeah.
Because through reflection, they will recognize God. The same thing with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he came to the Arabs with this message. It was all about, look, just reflect, just think for a moment what you're actually believing. Just think about it. That's all I'm asking you. You know, that when you're on your own, إنما أعيذكم بواحد. That when you're on your own, just have a think about belief. I think that if we today don't feel intimidated by reason and thought, and return to the Quranic roots of encouraging that, we will be able to tackle a lot of the problems, because and a lot of the challenge, we will rise to these challenges. We will do away with insecurities, because we've got nothing to be insecure about. We have an amazing tradition.
Except somebody with no clothes walking into the studio.
Except somebody with no clothes. I mean, we can feel a bit insecure. But I think it's his thoughts that are daunting. That what are his thoughts?
Well, with that was some of Jazakallah khair. Very,
Allahu
very
Akbar.
beneficial.
Shukran,
MashaAllah,
Adam.
MashaAllah.
Allahu Akbar.
Jazakallah khair.
Well, the presidential shakes.
So there you go, MashaAllah. That was another episode of #Encounters with Adam. If you benefited or learnt anything new, then make sure you share it. Make sure you tag your friends in.
You can, if you're on Facebook, you can add me. That's Mufti Abu Layth. And if you're on Snapchat, that's Malm MALM 2014-2014. So Malm 21 2014.
I'm sorry you didn't get the option to skip ad. MashaAllah. So yeah, Alhamdulillah, another amazing encounter with Adam. I hope you guys benefited.
There's a couple of questions in the comments.
We've got some questions, okay? Bismillah, give us the questions.
Okay, so the first question says, can we start a GoFundMe page for you so you can have your own mosque?
Why do we want a masjid to just end up getting burnt down? No.
I didn't see that one coming.
Alright, no. Okay, that was a bit too harsh, I think. Yeah, go for it, don't worry about it, man. But you know what? It's not about, for me as a person, it's not about masjids. It's about, to me, right now, it's more about religion as a whole. So I'm not personally, as a person, interested in being an imam. People like Imam Adam, Sheikh Adam, right? I think are ideal and legends for suiting that role. Me, I don't think I would necessarily fit that bill. I just would never be punctual to Salah. So everybody would just be waiting forever. So, but thank you, shukran for the gesture.
We've got a question from Houston, Texas.
Alright.
Somebody has asked,
Houston, we have a problem.
on the
line.
On the issue of clothing, somebody has asked, could you please expand on the same aspect for women, especially for women in unconventional but still modest attire at masajid?
Absolutely fine. There is no uniform in Islam. For women, it's about modesty that has been prescribed. That doesn't, in the Indo-Pak world, they wore shalwar kameez, had a dupatta. In parts of the Arab world, they have an abaya. In other parts of the world, they may wear skirts. Or in other parts of the world, dresses. In other parts of the world, trousers. I mean, whatever.
That's the thing. All you've got to do is look at even Muslim countries today and see how different men and women dress.
Exactly.
And it's obvious. It's a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing. So there's no issues there.
Okay, this is a bit of a long question. Sister's asked, isn't it that people dress in a certain way because it has been prescribed by Allah in the Quran? For example, the veil. And isn't the way men dress about emulating the beloved Prophet, peace be upon him? Isn't dress really about fulfilling fundamental principles of haya and covering your aura? The Prophet ﷺ dressed to fulfill high divine principles. So we can't say his reason was, so it was about dressing the same as the country he was in.
The answer is no, it isn't. So no to all of those. Quite simple, really.
No to everything.
The thing is that the Prophet it's not true that isn't it about this, isn't it about... Yes, obviously clothing is to cover your aura, but they weren't just trying to cover their aura, because they were dressing in accordance with what normal people were dressing like. They didn't, when they embraced Islam, they didn't change their uniform. As to the aura thing, I was going to highlight that it wasn't necessarily like, so let's say you have certain hadith describing the prayer of the men. So first of all, there were many Sahaba who just wore an izar. So on top they wore nothing, they were just bare chested. Right, so there were many men at the time that walked around like that, did stuff like that. You could say, well, that was poverty of clothing and stuff like that. But what is interesting is there is a hadith in which the women are advised that, okay, as you raise up from sujood, take your time, let people get up. And they generally said that, okay, a lot of the men, because they would wrap their izar so tight, that when they were in sujood, their private parts and the contours and stuff like this to it would show clearly. So this is why the women were advised, for kind of modesty and for the situation, look, you guys, I suppose, as you're getting up, get up quicker. But what wasn't done is the men weren't criticized, and the people weren't. It wasn't about criticism. It was about just handling a situation. So no, it's not about the Prophet. We're not advised to dress like 7th century Arabia. Nowhere in the Quran does it say that. Nowhere in the Sunnah does it say that. We're not asked to ride camels. We're not asked to. Islam was sent and the Prophet was sent to mankind. He wasn't sent to turn everybody into a 7th century Arab. That's never. The message was never about that.
This mosque would get burnt down.
Now you see why my masjid would get burnt down now.
MashaAllah. Any more questions before we
We
finish?
got two related questions. One said,
Two questioners who are related to each other.
Combine them into one question.
yeah, basically.
We'll finish with
One said, I never get cheap deals for Morocco, and the other one said, can you please give me the link for cheap flights to Morocco?
Okay.
Yeah.
Ryanair have just started Liverpool to Marrakesh. Not many people know about it. £19.99 each way if you book now.
Whoa, is it like that?
It's like that.
God, I might have to book out a flight now.
MashaAllah. A quick trip to the land of Qadi Abu Bakr.
Allahu
MashaAllah.
Akbar. Land of legends, land of legends. That's all I'll say.
Fez. Go to Fez.
Right, yep. So people,
MashaAllah.
shukran, barakallahu feekum. Sheikh Adam, right, is doing it. That's all I gotta say, is doing it. So
So there you go. We're going to log out now. Jazakumullah khair. As I said, share the post. Raise awareness. I don't have £1 million budget to do this. It's just a smartphone and some really, really interesting and amazing people who I meet on my way.
I'm paying him to say this.
You can subscribe as well. There's a way you can subscribe, isn't there, to live videos. I don't know where it is, but there should be a button what you can
Turn
press.
on notifications.
So, yes, that's the one. So
Live.
every time I come live, you'll be able to see straight away, and you'll be able to see another amazing encounter with Adam, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala.